I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Financial Forecasting Committee. Thank you everyone for being here. Karen is on her way. That's the only committee member missing right now. She got tied up. So I will call this meeting to order with thank you everyone for being here and for everyone's input on this process. We've had a lot of discussions both in the meetings, and there was a lot of input that I know that a lot of us shared out loud up here, but then also got comments into this draft that we're going to be working with tonight and going over. So I'm really happy about that because sometimes I'm not sure if everything was captured that we talked about or wanted to talk about, and so I really think this reflects the feelings that we've had up here and everyone's voices. Oh, and also I'd like to wish Jeff, Dr. Silva, happy birthday. So happy birthday. Nowhere he'd rather be than here. Yes. Exactly. Okay, so did everyone get a copy of the minutes? First order of business is, did everyone get a copy of the minutes from our last meeting on December 2nd? Right? So did anyone have any edits to the minutes?
Oh, no,
Yep.
not the minutes.
The minutes? Okay.
Motion to approve, that's written.
Second, did I have a motion and a second? Yep. Okay, all right, we've got a second from Dominic. All those in favor? Aye. All right, motion to approve, that's all set. All right. So next thing on our agenda is the discussion of our final, that's pretty much what we're doing today. We're discussing the final draft report, and then we're gonna wrap it up with some, like I promised, some ideas for the future that didn't make it into the report necessarily. So I'm gonna open it up though. We've all received a draft of the final report, and not only did a lot of you contribute comments and language to it, but I'm sure you've all had a chance to read the final report. We're gonna start with, I know Bryant has one kind of overarching clerical correction that we're going to do at first, because I know there's going to be other parts that we're going to discuss, but this is a numbers-based correction, so if I will turn it over to you to start that part of the process.
Thank you. So the report that was distributed by Mr. Perry earlier this week, there was one modification that was voted on at the last meeting that wasn't reflected in the expenditure schedule, and that's my apologies. I thought I got most of them, and I missed one and noticed it earlier. And so under the health insurance line, which is line F, at the meeting last week, we agreed to be consistent in the projection and to carry a 6% there. And so I've revised that now today, and I'm going to distribute revised versions of the expenditure schedule only is what changes. And as part of that, I already gave you one, yep. So if you could, there's two sheets.
You just want to put one up.
The first sheet is a summary of all the narrative parts of the report that will have to change because this spreadsheet has changed. And so if everyone feels comfortable with it, I would probably just recommend that when we motion at the end of the night to accept the report, that we include these changes so that they can be fixed by Mr. Perry and distributed as a final product. So you should see two. You should see the schedule and then a brief little bullet point of all the changes.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
I did talk with Mr. Ailes this morning. I reviewed all the modifications. Mr. Ailes, I agree with him, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Everything works for me too. So from a numbers point of view, the narrative, and I can easily change this if the committee agrees to Mr. Ailes' recommendation.
And if I could, the most notable change that you're going to see is the bottom line for FY27 which actually pushes the deficit up to an even larger number. So instead of what we were looking at in the distributed report was $3,798,542 as a deficit, that now gets pushed up to $3,921,385. So just a hair under 4 million.
Okay. Yes. So does anyone have any questions on this? I know we discussed this at the end of last meeting and agreed to that. So it is, like we've said in the past, it is the more conservative estimate on the whole, so, which is, yes, Karen?
I guess can you refresh my memory? I know the school had one school was using one number.
Oh, microphone, Karen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Can you just refresh my memory? I know that the school district was using the 6% and the city was using 5.5%. Did you confer and determine which was the accurate number, or did you just elect to go with the 6%? I can't remember.
So, yeah, we had a brief discussion here. Both of our average, we both presented some trends on averages and felt that the 6% was more in line with the more recent average increase for healthcare premiums.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding that number change? I'm gonna hand this down. Okay. All right, with that, then, let's just vote.
Maybe do it one at a time, because you may have some motions to modify that maybe everybody doesn't agree on. So I would suggest, Madam Chair, maybe Mr. Ailes is going to make a motion to accept his recommendation of 6% and see how the committee votes
Okay.
on this one.
Yeah, we'll do these one at a time.
Yeah, I think that's a
There's
good
gonna be a
idea.
couple of edits that might.
Yeah, so just for a point of clarification, I believe we collectively voted to approve the modification to 6% at the last meeting. So I don't think we need a motion for that. You know, this just incorporates what I was told to incorporate and just didn't get it to Jerry in time.
Okay, Dominic?
Okay, just a quick clarifying question. So at 5%, we were looking at the, was it the 3 million?
3,000,007, yeah.
Yeah, 3,000,007, and now, once we put it to the 6% that we all agreed to, that would take it up to just under the 4 million. Correct? That's the
Correct.
change overall. All right, thank you.
So, we all agreed on it
Yep.
last time, so
Sounds
we
good.
can leave it at that for this one. But for any other substantive edits, or motions to amend language from here on out, we will take them one at a time and we will vote on them individually. So, that works for everyone? Let's move on. So we're gonna take this one page at a time. I don't know if everyone has a copy of this with them, or, because I believe any edits that people would want would be on a specific page, would be my hopes that that's how they came prepared, right? Okay, so, page 1, executive summary. Does anyone have any edits or changes they would like to make to the executive summary? Oh, page 2 in the PDF, yeah. All right. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4, right, Emma?
Microphone. So on page 3, I guess there was 2 things that I wanted to potentially suggest.
Okay.
The first being that on the second paragraph where it starts, revenues are governed by the laws of Proposition 2.5, I thought it might be helpful to clarify for people who are perhaps a little bit less familiar that revenues are largely governed, or that property tax revenues are governed by Proposition 2.5, just to provide a little bit more clarification in that there are some revenue streams that are not subject to that limitation.
Okay, so include the word largely, or?
I'm open to friendly amendments, to thought partnering. I don't know if it's helpful to be more specific, to name them as property taxes being subject to, or if we want to use a broader brush, I'm happy to insert the word largely.
if I could suggest, maybe, I got you, that's a fair comment.
good-
If we, how about we just say tax levy revenues? That does it right, that hopefully achieves what you want, right?
Yes.
If that's okay with everybody.
Can I just make a, because I had the exact same edit, and I reworded it as right at the beginning of the paragraph, property tax revenues, because that's really what we're talking about. Levy sometimes can be confusing to the reader.
That's true.
So it's the property taxes that are governed by 2.5.
I agree.
Yeah.
For layman,
Property tax revenue, for this purpose of this
Got it.
report. It's actually on page
It's page 4 of the printout.
4 of the
or
printout, 5 of the PDF.
5 of the, your.
Under, so it's on the next page, yep, and then it's that, second paragraph, revenues are governed by, that, right there.
And as everybody knows, I don't know if they'll be interested, but we put a link to the whole 2.5 stuff. So if someone's really interested, they could do a deep dive into it. So,
I appreciate, we did that last year,
yes, we did.
yes, that was Representative Bowen's idea.
So then, is it appropriate for me to then make a motion
Yep.
to suggest the amendment to change the first word of the second paragraph on numbered page 4 to property tax revenues?
Yes.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Great. Okey dokey. All right.
I had another one.
Yes. No, that's great. Over here.
I apologize in advance. I really tried to take a lens of if I was someone without familiarity, what I think might be helpful. And I know, Jerry, you penned this as someone with a deep and vast knowledge. And so while I know that you are also aiming to meet them, I'm hoping to bring some of that lens. In the third paragraph, where there is a discussion of why we would potentially not consider, or why we seek to fund our, keep our free cash balance there. And there is something, my note is not wildly clear. Yes, still on page 4. I'm just trying to think where this line was supposed to be going. But I thought it might be helpful to include some sort of clarification that if there was a decision to be less conservative in a position that might then generate free cash, that we would then need to move the quasi-operating expenses that are currently being funded through free cash into the operating. And so it's not like we found other money, right? So if we are no longer funding roads and sidewalks through free cash, it's not that we would not need to continue to do work to our roads and sidewalks, just that that money would then need to be moved back into the operating as well.
So
Do you have specific, I'm fine with.
No, and I apologize because I should have come better prepared for that specific.
I think you're talking about probably the last sentence of the third paragraph. The committee suggests that the city policymakers consider reducing the target percentage associated with free cash in an effort to augment operational expenditures. There, maybe like a clarification.
Perhaps even 2 sentences above that. So where it said, it should be noted that before the close of FY '26, approximately $7 million would need to be spent from reserves for City Hall, et cetera, among other requests. Perhaps the insertion of a sentence that says, should revenue assumptions be augmented to no longer generate an equivalent amount of free cash, some of the expenses will need to be restored back into the operating budget.
Okay,
If I could suggest, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I'm fine with, it's your report, I got no problem. Whatever you want to do, I'm not quite following this, if you just give me an email and what you want to put in it, and if the committee agrees with whatever it is you want to do, I'm fine with that. But I don't,
Yeah,
and I understand
it's
what
kind
you're
of hard for
saying.
me to figure out what you want to say. really.
Yeah.
The reason why I pointed out the last sentence is because I wrote the last sentence. And
Yeah, that was,
trying
the
to
chair
get-
did that.
I was trying to get at what you're saying, like, it's the flip side of what I was kind of trying to, the goal I was trying to achieve by that last sentence in that paragraph is considering targeting a lower percentage of free cash to free up more operational budget. But then on the converse, and that's why I said maybe to augment that sentence. And I didn't want to be redundant by putting the word augment in expenditures and free cash, like two lines before that. So I'm trying to kind of make that into one thought that would be more encompassing of both sides.
Right.
Frankly, I thought the paragraph already kind of went so heavy on why I was trying to counter the fact that we are targeting a higher percentage for free cash. So I was trying to kind of consider the converse. So that's the only reason why I didn't think of continuing to give credence to the other side of the coin on that one. So,
Could I suggest something that might meet both
Yeah,
of the
that would be great.
perspectives that you bring to the table on that last sentence? If we add it at the end, so it would read, "The committee suggests that city policymakers consider reducing the target percentage associated with free cash in an effort to augment operational expenditures, understanding that this may create additional pressure on the operating budget in the future."
sure, that sounds great.
Does that meet it?
Yeah.
Can you say that a little slower, please? I just don't write that quick.
I
Understanding,
hope I say it the same way.
I can help you.
Understanding this may create additional pressure on the operating budget in the future. Was that right? Yeah.
I think that keeps it high level. I don't want to get too in the weeds on, we moved this into free cash and we moved this, because I think I want to keep it more succinct. This is longer than it's ever been before, and I just want to make sure that we don't get too far
Yes.
into it.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted, and again, right, trying to take the lens of some people where this language is really not something they're entirely comfortable with, to acknowledge that this move alone does not then create, it does not create an equivalent amount of budget capacity, because with it will come the expenses
Correct.
that are still important, still imperative, and that we are currently funding on the other side. So it's, I just want to make, that was the lens of it. It's not an equivalent exchange.
Right. Dominic? Yeah.
Yeah, I just, so I had a question in that. So is that a direct correlation necessarily, that if we reduce free cash, we necessarily have to then put roads and everything back into the normal budget?
Or don't do them.
don't do
Yeah.
it.
So you're saying right now, the only way that we can do roads and budget is because of free cash?
Yes, I mean, keep in mind, last year, we had roads and sidewalks money in the operating budget. We made a conscious decision to move it to free cash to free up operating budget capacity to put towards operations. The same thing we're talking about now. If we do that again, then the ability to utilize free cash to do it in the future goes away. And now you've exhausted your very last stopgap to fund things like roads and sidewalks, or you put that back in the operating budget and something else might fall out. I mean, that's Emma's point, is it's not a easy solution. It's not a silver bullet. There's consequences.
Right, and to borrow Paul's example, the pie does not get any bigger. It does, so it creates, it's a different function to accomplish the same means, but there is not a version by, it does not make the pie any bigger, even though it might make the operating budget bigger, because in order to be able to fund these things, we either need to be funding them from our savings account, which we are occasionally replenishing, or we are funding them with our general budget.
Yeah,
So-
and I understand. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. I understand it. It just sounds like, just to a layperson, it's like, okay, every year we draw down free cash to zero to pay for all these things.
No, we don't.
We don't,
No,
though.
we don't.
And
I know
that's-
that,
think
that's what I'm
my-
saying.
my
I know
point,
that we
right.
don't. That's what I'm
Yes.
saying. But that's what it sounds like.
That's a great point, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Could we know we don't deplete free cash to zero, and we make a contribution to the stabilization fund. So my question is, could we, instead of targeting 10 million for free cash, why couldn't we target 8 million one year and move that? That's kind of what I was trying to get at, and that's why I understand that if we put it into this operating budget, if we put roads and sidewalks at 2 million back into this operating budget, we'd be looking at a $6 million deficit. I understand like, on a budgetary line item, that's what it would look like, but at the end of the year, it would be more true to what the operational expenses would be. It would be a lower free cash balance. To your point, we don't draw it down to zero, and so, that was why I said consideration. That's why I wrote it as such. It's just, you know, the pie doesn't get any bigger. It's moving money from the left hand to the right hand in some ways. And so I just wanted to consider looking at the pie differently, not making it bigger.
So you say not making the pie bigger, there's just.
I think we can't. I
No,
wish
no,
I
no.
could.
No, I'm just saying, but there's just less pie there to be eaten at the end, right? If we, less
Yes,
free cash would be
right.
there. So less of
Because
that.
we
to
ate
eat.
so much pie during the year.
And if I may, Madam Chair, Brian talked about it, but keep this in mind, which is a policy decision for everybody to make if they want to use, like, reduce the free cash to slide over the operations. As I talked about this last week, strategically, our debt management practices have been to, use our debt specifically as we retire it to replenish it at around, should be around 7%, we're less than that. And we've also used free cash for the last 5, 6, 7 years here to do our capital infrastructure needs. And as Emma rightly and Paul rightly, the pie is only so big. So as you shift money, let's say from free cash, that's what you're talking a little bit about, what means is the ability to do infrastructure needs gets much more challenging. And as a lot of the people who've been here a long time, we went 20, 30 years trying to figure out how to do a police station. We figured it out because one of the main factors was we used free cash in the way we're doing it now. And if we shift the money over to operations, you're going back to the way it was 10, 12, 13 years ago, which is a policy decision, but things like libraries and council of agings and, quite frankly, school roofs scare me the most. Those are the things that are going to get much more difficult to do if we go in that direction. I just think it's important. I say that not only, I think you all know this, but it's important for the public to understand that as well. It'll be harder to do that.
Karen, did you have a question? Yes. So when it comes to free cash and the sustainability budget, do we have a lot more than our neighboring communities have? Because it just seems like maybe we need to bring it down a little bit because we do have a lot of expenses that we need to take care of.
So we went over that, we did talk about this last week in terms of like, it's not a cookie cutter answer, basically, because every community has different revenue streams and sources and needs and debt and bond ratings and all of these things. So Bryant had explained that it was the target number that in reserves is based on historical data for Beverly and economic downturns and that, for that matter. However, that was why, the consideration of that was why I wanted to add this part to the report because, and we are, so it's possible to look at it differently and look at that, and that's what I'm hoping this encourages, to make sure we are considering that, at least considering it, and not just saying it's not gonna work, so.
Okay,
So that is, but.
thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Because, you know, I know we went over this the other day, but I think it's important that maybe we reiterate. If, for example, and this is just hypothetical, we were to shift some stabilization money into the operating budget to support the expenditures that are outstripping our revenue stream, what you'll be faced with next year is a stabilization fund that's insufficient to meet the needs during the next recession because you've transferred money out and used it for operations, and now your expense level is so high that you need to basically double the reduction that you make that you would have had to make in year one. So you're actually exacerbating the problem and putting the city in a much less stable financial situation. So I need to kind of state that very clearly because we keep kind of going around in this circle.
Yeah.
And I gotta say it for the record.
And that's the
Right.
definition of a structural
Well-
deficit.
True, but there is a difference between the free cash percentage that we're targeting And I wasn't implying a stabilization fund, because those are two different buckets. So I am not in any way trying to add in using the stabilization fund for operating expenses. That's a no-no. I'm just considering restructuring the budget and what we look to for operational expenses earlier rather than projecting them out later. I understand what you're saying, but we are not, yes, reserves cannot be used for operational expenses. So.
I have just one more question, Brian. At what point do you believe that the stabilization fund would be at
Sufficient?
yeah. Because I think that's really the question. We keep putting money in, we're not drawing money out for good reason. So do we need to keep putting as much money in, and to what point?
Yeah. So as the budget grows, so too does the level of risk that you have, because revenues are growing, so the shortfalls grow during a recession, right? So part of our strategy to make periodic deposits into the fund is to keep the fund proportional with the budget, so that it's an actual percentage of the budget as opposed to a dollar figure, because you're filling a gap that's proportional to the revenues.
Got it.
Okay? So our policy, when we developed it collectively, had to do with free cash, because when the city was doing well and certifying good levels of free cash, a portion of that free cash was set aside into the stabilization fund. And as the budget grows, free cash would grow, and the stabilization fund would be able to grow as well. We're at a point now where we are, I would say, in a very, healthy place in terms of stabilization, because it's close to the upward part of our target range. That's not to say we shouldn't, continue to contribute in there, but we've been fortunate this past year because we've had significant returns on that. We invest that money, right? And so we took in significant amount of revenue that we typically would rely on free cash to replenish. So there might be opportunity going forward to look at, is the transfer in amount still appropriate given the current level? But in terms of withdrawing, I say, well, no, we're where we need to be, but how much we put into it every year, that's probably a policy that is worth at least looking at and revisiting.
And just as a follow-up, and I know this is not the purview of this committee at all, but what is the definition of the triggering type of event to draw from the stabilization fund? What would have to be happening for that to occur?
So we went over this a little bit the other night, but the significant events that have occurred in the past were that state aid got reduced by 15% year over year in real dollars, and then like another percentage, and then a third percentage in a third year, and over a 3-year period, our local aid got cut, like, I want to say 20 to 24%.
So external
That's one example.
Yeah.
That happened both of the last recessions. So it's very likely that if we hit a recession, we're going to have a very similar event. What did we do when, in that case, because we didn't have reserves? We closed 2 elementary schools. We implemented the trash fee. We did some very drastic things in this community because we weren't prepared, right? It's about the story of the grasshopper and I forget the kid's story. One of them prepared and was ready for the event, and the other one didn't. And we know how that story goes for those of us with kids, but like, it's no different here.
Okay. Thank you.
And just, I sent you all a report today on the tax rate recap. I'm sure you all read it, but as Brian articulated, the budget grew. Well, we finally cracked the $200 million budget process. We were at 192 in FY '25, and the tax rate recap indicates we hit $200 million. So it went up $8 million from '25 to the current fiscal year. You'll see all that in that memo in the report. So that's why he's trying to talk to proportionality, because it went up by $8 million just in 1 year. So just to give you context.
I think it's important for people to understand that, because when the stabilization fund was initially instituted, the city's budget was considerably, annual budget was considerably less. So if there was a specific number, $50 million, that seems like it's a tremendous amount of money, but it might be grossly inadequate for what our annual budget is in 2025. And I have heard from people who have asked, how much is enough in that stabilization fund, Karen? And I appreciate that answer, because it isn't a fixed number.
Right.
Just
Percentage-based.
to reiterate, our policy is 10 to 15% of the operating budget in the stabilization fund. So,
I just think it might also be helpful to share too, that, right, like these type of economic events are generally multi-year, and so we're looking not to support just one budget year cycle, but we are probably looking to support 2, 3, potentially longer. And so again, proportional to 1 year's budget, but really then across a multitude. And so even if you're saying, well, $200 million, and so we have, let's pretend it's $50 million, because I don't know what the number is, right? Even if that's 25%, well, it's 25% of 1 year. And we might be looking at needing to address 2, 3, 4 years worth of shortfalls as the community responds. Because again, as we've talked about around this table too, right, some of the very few remaining levers that might potentially exist are not levers that can be pulled easily in one cycle. They require, a number of other factors to be at play, and those are not things that necessarily the community would have the luxury of acting quickly on, depending on what they might be.
Okay, so.
So I think you have a
Goes
motion on the
page 4.
table.
We have a motion to add to add the friendly amendment that we've agreed upon, the language that Bryant shared. Do we have a motion?
I thought there was a motion. Brian making a motion, I don't know if
Do we
somebody
have a
seconded.
motion to,
I'll make a motion that we add the language of the.
microphone.
I make a motion that we add on page 4, third full paragraph, tacking on to the end of the last sentence, the following language: understanding this may create additional pressure on the operating budget in the future.
Second.
All those in favor? Great. Okay. Any other edits on page 4?
I don't have anything on page 4, but just real quick, back on page 2, I don't know if we addressed this already, but the last sentence, deficit in the amount of, and it has the old deficit amount number.
Oh, we blanketed. That's when, so anytime that number comes up, that, I think Bryant handed it out. That has all the listing where it was listed, so.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just different on the copy that I have, like the page number, that's all.
Oh, okay,
I'm familiar with, I'm going to take care of that, all of that stuff.
Thank you.
all right. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, page 5, your PDF, page 6.
Page,
PDF 6?
I think it's the PDF, page 6. It says expenditures in the middle of the page. So it's numbered page 5. We ran into this last year, too. Some people's PDFs look differently than others. So does anyone have an amendment on page 5? Paul?
So not surprisingly, I had some issues with the paragraph that starts out the vocational school assessment, et cetera. I think this unfairly puts a lot of the problems of the city of Beverly around the necks of Essex North Shore Vocational and Technical School. And so a couple of things I'd like to see. First of all, a recognition that the increase is largely due to enrollment. It's not that the bills are more expensive, we just simply have more students going to that school. And so my first suggestion would be the vocational school assessment anticipates a total expenditure of whatever, a 13.66% increase from the prior fiscal year due largely to enrollment increases. And then I would probably just stop right there. I'd delete the rest of it.
Is that a motion, Paul?
That is a motion, yes.
Okay, I will open it up for discussion. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
For whatever it's worth, it's factually accurate, in my
Yeah.
view anyways.
I know we discussed this last, I can't in good faith say I support deleting it completely because we did discuss this last week. I mean, we need to at least, it is factually accurate, even if it's not wholly, you know, we've said this isn't a person's fault or an entity's fault, it's just the numbers.
So I think well, do you want to go?
Well, I was just gonna, I think the language is unnecessarily negative towards the vocational program. And I would like to note that Beverly Public Schools does not have vocational education that it can offer to the students that are attending Essex Tech for vocational education. And the city elected to go into this program because they felt at the time, and I think it's actually more true today, but felt at the time that high-quality vocational education was necessary to meet the needs of a significant percentage of our students. And I would go on to say that while the vocational school is more expensive perhaps now than what we had expected it would be, I don't think vocational and technical education has ever been more important. And so while I understand Mr. Perry's point about the fact that this is a big line item here, I absolutely can't support language in this report that kind of to me, feels like it undermines our commitment to that type of education.
Okay, yes?
I'm wondering if there is the potential to replace some of the language. I was working on some wordsmithing here, but potentially that replace the section that Paul is suggesting as striking with perhaps the committee recommends a review of the vocational regional agreement and the ability of Beverly Public Schools to support vocational education internally. Because I understand the pressure that exists and agree that it is by function of students pursuing a valuable vocational education. And so two things can be true, right? We are not in a $4 million deficit across the city because students are pursuing education at Essex North Shore. And also my limited understanding relative to the vocational agreement, and so I acknowledge that off the bat, is that, right, at a point in time, this community and the relevant policymakers decided that this is what was good for Beverly. And so it might be time for an equivalent group of relevant policymakers to look at, is this still what's right for Beverly? And without assigning any sort of moral value to what that decision might be.
So I agree on wordsmithing. I would say that also we could just strike the last sentence completely. It's already, I mean, there's budgetary stress everywhere, so I would first motion to, if we could strike the last sentence in its entirety.
Well, I'm fine with everything. Can we just be a tad organized? He's
Yeah,
got one, let's do
right.
his
Okay.
motion first, then we can come to that, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair. Paul
Okay.
has on a motion to insert after the first sentence of that paragraph,
let's-
due largely to enrollment increases. That's my notes.
Okay, can we take a vote on that?
Yes.
So largely adding to the end of the first sentence, due largely to enrollment increases.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? And then I would like to make a motion to strike the whole last sentence in its entirety.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? So then we're left with two sentences, which I think are worded in a way that is unduly negative. But also, I would like to capture our conversation to some extent that we're talking about wordsmithing. We could possibly say there was, discussion that having the large budgetary increases due to the size of enrollment may be unsustainable, given the constraints of Proposition 2.5.
So
Something.
again, I think we're still picking out this one line item out of your budget, and we're hanging a lot of the guilt on that particular line item. And so while some of us may have suggested that this is an area where we should pursue some cost-cutting measures, I don't feel that it was necessarily the consensus among the group that this is where we should go. If there was any consensus made, we talked a lot about trash fees. This wasn't one of those areas where I think a lot of people going, yeah, that's what we got to do. And so that's why I'm saying we should just get rid of all of that. Recognize that there are increases, sure, but I think the sentiment of going after this line item was probably expressed by one or two people very strongly and not the group as a whole.
I would like to make a motion
Yep.
to amend.
Microphone?
I would like to make a motion to amend the second and third sentences to retain them in part and strike them in part, so that it reads as follows. Because we did have discussion, and I think it's appropriate to capture the fact we had discussion. To read as follows. There was discussion that having large budgetary increases in vocational education presents policymakers with difficult decisions regarding this spending category.
I would second that.
So it captures the history, retains some of the fact that it's difficult, we need to wrestle with it, but I think takes away sort of the judgment, the judgmental qualities relating to it.
I also want to, I'm definitely going to get there, Emma. I also just want to mention that we do talk about cuts in other line items later in the report. So it's not picking on just one thing. There's other amendments that are going to be made. And we did discuss it. We're not even discussing a cut. It's just the facts are, it is one of the factors creating stress and increases, as the whole school budget is. So it's just the fact of the way it's laid out in the assessment. That's how I feel like it would be not capturing our conversation correctly to not at least acknowledge that it is a factor.
So the line right above this paragraph that I'm talking about the Beverly Public Schools, which again, this is a public school that Beverly students go to. So to separate the two, I think, is doing vocational education a disservice. But anyways, the last line above that, the district, like most other school districts, faces financial challenges associated with special education and healthcare expenditures. No judgment there. No finger pointing at the Beverly Public Schools that they need to go start trimming programs and getting rid of people. So I say take that same sentiment and apply it to the next paragraph down.
Emma?
I think that, thank you. I think what is being said, I agree with Paul that what's being said here, while true, relative to it outpacing Proposition 2.5 and needing to make difficult decisions is true of this, but is true about our operation as a whole, and it is not named in any other place. And so perhaps that sentiment, which is for all of these things where they are outpacing Proposition 2.5, policymakers have to make a difficult decision, is perhaps better suited somewhere else in the report rather than, you know, directly next to a conversation of vocational education where someone may infer that it is specific to that. I also do want to share my perspective relative to places where policymakers have the ability to influence a lot of change. Given the structure of the vocational regional agreement, it is not solely at the discretion of Beverly policymakers. And so that is an important piece of this too. For instance, and I'm certainly not suggesting that this is what we are looking to do, that anybody at this table is saying that we are looking to do, that what our community wants us to do, but should, right, giant should, it be the desire of relevant policymakers to say that we would no longer want to be a member of Essex North Shore. That is not an independent decision that we would get to make, given the structure of regional vocational schools and the regional agreement that the community and the city committed to. So I do think that is an appropriate caveat to the sentiment. Again, so even with the councilman's amendment saying that policymakers would need to make a difficult decision, it is not solely on Beverly policymakers to make that decision.
Right, but we did talk about last time, and this is where I think it stands out and it's separate, is that what is that enrollment number? We do have control over how many people, correct? Am I correct that it was, we don't, didn't you?
I'm sorry.
The number of, to my understanding at the last meeting, it was said that the target number of enrollees was determined by, you hadn't been told to keep it under anything less, that it was going up. I mean, the number of people being admitted and enrolled, and is that a factor under our control? I think that's what we were trying to get at, which is, because I understand we can't control the other factors, but how many enrollees is appropriate for our budgetary constraints is, I think, what we were trying to get at last.
I think the point I was trying to speak on was that because of the new admissions policy instituted by the state, that we were forced to come up with an allotment procedure. There's no hard cap on the number of students from any one community, but there are targets, and those targets reflect the current enrollment of each of the member communities. We could certainly go over that number. We could fall far short of that number, but it's more of a goal as opposed to a cap or a floor.
But who determines that?
So we have a school committee that will probably this Thursday vote to set those allotment numbers for the 17 member communities. But again, even though the numbers on the spreadsheet says Beverly has 60, we could get 58, we could get 62. It all comes down to, again, because it's a random lottery, how many students from Beverly apply versus how many students from other schools apply, and where the ping pong balls fall.
Jeff, I know. Jeff?
I would just point out that even though the number is increasing, it's still about half of what the number of enrollees are. So we're still not applicants. We're still not meeting the needs of the students that would like to attend the vocational schools. So we're not meeting, even at that rate, we're not meeting what the needs are.
I would like to amend my motion.
Okay,
By withdrawing it
okay.
and restating it slightly differently, in a way that may address the
Right.
points that Paul's making, which I accept, which I acknowledge. So let me try a little bit different version, see if it passes muster. And I know that my microphone is on. Replacing sentences 2 and 3 to read with the following language. There was discussion that having large budgetary increases in vocational education presents policymakers with additional difficult decisions. Just, is that neutral enough? Because it's really referring back to the previous paragraph, which says we've got some other things that create financial challenges to it. So we tried to put it on the same level.
I like that it's quite a bit shorter than before.
So that's my motion.
Okay,
Is there a second to the motion?
I second that.
I guess the thing that I think that the piece of this that we're not talking about, and I don't even know that we have the ability to talk really about it in a meaningful way. I think Emma touched on it. I think that the vocational school line item is so difficult for us to talk about because we don't really have any control over it. The city lacks, other than Paul's outstanding representation of the city's students' interests on the school committee there, it's kind of a black box in terms of our understanding, how the decisions are made, and how our city's interests are served. And I don't know whether perhaps, I don't know, Emma, if this is what you were kind of driving at, that maybe it is time for people to have a conversation about, what, maybe reaffirming our commitment, or talking about what if there are limitations, what they are, and reaffirming our commitment in that manner, so that there isn't this type of back and forth going forward
Right.
in the next budget cycle and the following one.
Can I ask, Paul, are there unique grant opportunities that are strictly for vocational schools?
Yes.
That the city addresses?
That the city.
That Beverly seeks to support the vocational schools?
Maybe Bryant might have more information on that. I mean, I know that the school itself seeks independent grant funding and receives quite a bit. So if you were to look at the budget that I present, right, I distribute to the council every year, includes an assessment. It's a local assessment for what Beverly pays to send its 223 students to Essex North Shore. And included in that is a per pupil assessment. That per pupil assessment is actually, falls far short of the actual per pupil spending, because Essex North Shore brings in millions of dollars every year in independent grant funding, both from private citizens, from state, from federal. And so that per pupil number is actually quite a bit higher because it's supported by other means. What the city does, I really can't speak to.
So, but, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that there should be some grant effort to help subsidize this particular aspect of the school budget that's centered on, subsidizing the vocational school.
It's possible. I'm not aware of any. I know that the city itself gets, well, you'll know that the city gets funding for its own vocational programs.
Right, and so relative to grant opportunities, largely the grant opportunities that exist on our side of this, and so I think what I'm hearing Paul say, first and foremost, is that there are grant opportunities that are awarded to Essex Tech that we then derive benefit from by a reduced per pupil cost that is assessed to us. The grant opportunities that exist for the district, so we talked last time we met about the millionaire's tax and what that supplemental revenue in our state is doing. And there is a large effort at the state level to provide additional funding for CTE and vocational programs. However, they are largely aimed at developing new programs, new strands. I have not seen them aimed at reducing costs for existing programs or for structures like ours. So we do receive a Perkins grant that helps support some of our internal programming. We also received a grant 2 years ago from the state to help support our initial After Dark, which is a half-day CTE program with Salem High School. But it really is in that initial phase, and it's to help establish new pipelines. These funds are generally, I've not seen them available for the continuation.
Dominic?
Yeah, I was going to say, so a couple things real quick. It seems like one of the major issues is the potential not to be able to control the cost, as far as not being able to control the number of seats. So maybe suggesting at some point being able to put a cap on the number of seats that we're willing to finance going forward. And then also, probably at some point, and probably even still to today, this probably was a cost savings for the city. Instead of the city having to build out their actual own programs for these students, it provides a cost savings to then have them go over to Essex Tech instead. So I just want us to be able to see through that purview as well, where this may actually be a cost savings for the city. The problem might be we're worried about uncontrollable costs, and that makes it unsustainable going forward. So we might be able to put in measures or look into this to put in measures where those costs can be controlled as much as possible, while students still are able to benefit from this, because it's a great program and makes a tremendous difference. And instead of coming out saddled with debt, you have students that come out and they're able to have careers, be productive, start buying homes sooner, vehicles, be productive members of society, right? So I can't see us actively trying to take that away, or I understand the budget constraints, and this is all true. We just have to, as they say, make it make sense, right? So let's cap our downside while still being able to have this program.
And that's partially why I do like the general language that Scott has suggested, because I'm not trying to, my kid goes to Essex Tech. I think it's a great school. It's fantastic, and I don't want to not be I'm not saying that we're not part of it. It's not right to say that this isn't one of the stresses on the budget. There's lots of stresses on the budget, and that's what this report's going into. So, with that, Scott, did you have more to say on that, or?
Yeah, I just want to be really clear that I'm trying to make the report accurate, because the sentence as proposed, I think, is accurate and does not have value judgment. I think it puts it on the same plane as other statements in the report, which suggests that, X, Y, or Z present challenges to policymakers. The fact of the matter is, whether it's the VOC, whether it's special education, whether it's roads and sidewalks, whether it's capital expenditures, all of them present financial challenges that are creating a nearly $4 million structural deficit. And to say that does not in and of itself in any way suggest that the VOC is not transformational for its many students that go there, that there is not a greater need than supply at the VOC. All of those things are true. But at the end of the day, I suggest that the proposed language is neutral on its face and is accurately reflects the fact that we did have a discussion about, like we're having now, about the budgetary challenges of the VOC, just like we have had those discussions about lots of other factors. So I guess maybe I should just call the motion unless there's more.
You motioned it, I second. Can we vote on this? All those in favor of amending,
To reread it?
okay. This,
Yeah. So this would be, obviously, the paragraph related to the Voc school. It would be to amend the second and third sentences to read as follows. There was discussion that having large budgetary increases in vocational education presents policymakers with additional difficult decisions.
Can I offer a
That's the end of
friendly,
the paragraph, right?
End of the paragraph.
That's the end of the
Yes,
paragraph.
Yes.
can I offer a friendly amendment that might offer that the limited scope of local control over the vocational assessment, and then maybe make that the first half of yours, and then lead back into where you were saying makes additional difficult decisions for policymakers? You like his better? All right.
I think it's simpler. Also, I think it just captures large budgetary, I mean, that's
Yeah.
just, it,
I feel like what I'm hearing though in this is that, right, part of the challenge here is the limited scope of local control, right? We do not actually have the ability to largely influence this. The same way that should Essex North Shore open a new strand that increases their capacity, right? And so they now have 100 additional seats that we could have a share in. We have limited scope in our ability, and that is really the crux of what creates
right.
part of that budget issue.
I do get it, but did,
My response would be I would not accept the friendly amendment because just like the previous sentence, or the previous paragraph, last sentence, there are lots of nuances to special education and why it
control
presents certain challenges. And your friendly amendment would sort of get us more into the weeds than I think the report really calls for.
I appreciate that.
the simplicity
Rescinded.
of, the simplicity of the fact of the matter is, it's difficult choices. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean necessarily that it creates financial stress. And I think I like it simple, so,
So we're saying that it's not large uncontrolled, it's just large altogether.
yeah, those are facts. There's budgetary increases. So do we want to take a vote on the amendment as read by Scott? All those in favor? All right, the motion passes. That was,
Madam Chair, if I may, just, I don't want to have any confusion. Scott, would you be kind enough to just fire off a quick email?
You got
in
it.
the morning, so
Yep.
I will, exactly the way you read it, I'll put it in.
You got it.
I have
Thank
the
you.
edits too if you need it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't want to make a mistake.
Did you want to count on that? Because I noticed some hands.
Some hands were not going.
Yeah, no, it passes, but it was 1, 2, 3. Did, you voted yes?
I voted yes.
Yeah, okay, it was,
Everybody but Jerry. 'cause-
everybody but Donna.
Dr. Silva, did you vote?
I did vote,
Did you vote for it?
yes.
Yeah, I think it was, yes, it was,
One is no.
1 is no, yes.
There
There was one no.
There was one no?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, what, I'm sorry, what was that?
All right.
I didn't see who voted the no, that's all.
Dominic did not vote.
Oh,
for it,
okay.
so, okay.
That's okay.
All right, so on to page, is that it for page 5? Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so just being new to this committee, I'm not sure if this is the place to discuss whether we think the 5.27 increase would be enough for the following year,
What-
27.
I'm sorry,
Anticipates a total expenditure of 89 million and, or 5.27 increase from the prior fiscal year. I guess, I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, that we think we need, that if we think we need more than that.
well, that would have been in the last meeting with what Emma presented, because these are the numbers that we voted on at the last one, so it's, that budget is gonna have to be, that number is gonna have to stay from.
The only, from a parliamentary procedural, first off, that's the number submitted by the schools to us, so there's that. If Ms. Robinson wants to do what she wants to do, procedurally, you'd have to request a motion for reconsideration, get a second, get a majority vote, then you'd have to make a motion, I don't know what number you want to throw out there, that's up to you, of course, and go from there, but that would be the procedural way to go forward.
Okay, so that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yes,
and-
it is.
And I
Also-
apologize for that, and it was
Don't
my
apologize.
first meeting, so.
I understand, and also, I'd like to remind everyone watching, following along at home, up here, that this is recommendations on a committee, this is not the budget. Like, this is the base, the springboard for which it starts, so there will be an appropriate time to consider those factors, but this is our analysis of the budget as stands, as presented today. So don't worry.
So maybe I could just add that I think we should address the fact that we need to increase our per pupil spending in this, maybe on this page or in this paragraph, we address the idea that we need to increase our per pupil spending, our increasing enrollment, and our need to hold on to student-facing positions in our schools, if we can add that to the paragraph on.
So we don't tend to get into budgetary line items, specific recommendations within the budgets of the departments in this type of report, because I think we would have a lot more work to do. We would have had to start this process a lot earlier if we were to get into that. So I'm not sure it would be, this is already kind of longer and more than we've ever said before, whereas I do think it's something that needs to be considered and is appropriate. I'm not sure if it makes the most sense, since we already voted on the numbers, to be included in this document here today. That's my thoughts. Does anyone else have any? Emma, did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think perhaps just a reiteration of the fact that this is not a final budget number. This is not the number that becomes the superintendent's recommended budget to the school committee. This does not involve analysis or budget priorities by the school committee that may result in other changes. This is largely a going concern presented. So it assumes the same number of staff. It assumes projections based on historic trends, which is distinctly through a forecast model, which is distinctly different than the process that we go through both as an administrative team and as the school committee team in the review of the budget, where all of those pieces would come into play.
I appreciate that, thank you.
There definitely will be time, there's a time and a place for that, absolutely. And after, we wrap up the edits of the actual report, I do want to have a discussion on, some of those priorities and things that we would like to discuss future facing and what work needs to be done next. But this is just right now, so yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. And does anyone else, so this is page 5, still on 5. Any other amendments to page 5? Okay, moving on to page 6. Does anyone have, Jeff?
So for page 6, on the top where there's a single bullet, I think it might make sense to actually place 2 bullets. One that's sort of city-centric, and the second that is school-centric. So for the first bullet, to say basically what's there, but strip out the school. So city officials should consider certain reductions in municipal services, including possible reduction in municipal staffing through attrition and/or a reduction in the workforce. And then the second bullet being, school officials should consider certain reductions in school district costs, including possible temporary restructuring of class sizes that are closer to the allowable maximum size, reduction in municipal and school staffing through attrition and/or a reduction in the workforce. So basically stating the levers that are available to the school, to the city, to control costs.
So that's a motion, is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Do we have a second for discussion?
Madam Chair, Mr. Silva did forward that, I have that, at least I have that language in writing right now. So I thank you for that, by the way.
Yes.
Doctor, so what are, the bullet point that is there presently captures both municipal and school side. What are you trying to capture by breaking out into separate bullet points, distinguishing the school from on one side, the municipal on the other?
I just think that the school and the city have different levers to pull to control costs.
Well, you talked, one being, the main difference being not attrition, but increasing class sizes? Was that the only difference?
That's a difference.
That is a difference. Yes, that's
class size.
primarily that's the main difference. Restructuring the class sizes as well. Yep.
Just clarification, are you suggesting that we would be recommending that we might increase class sizes?
It's not a recommendation. It's basically allowing the superintendent to adjust the appropriate levers they have to control costs for operation of schools.
Karen?
I appreciate that additional lever that you identified. My concern, one of the concerns that I expressed in the comments that I sent in was that I feel that it's very important that the community understands that this is not a city school with a partition in between problem that needs to be solved. This is a municipal problem, and the solutions need to come from the entirety of the municipal function. So if breaking that out in the way that you suggested would not make it appear that we were putting more emphasis on one side versus another, I wouldn't object. But I'm very aware of the fact that these budget issues, when it comes to having to make reductions, often devolves very quickly into school versus city. And I don't think that that is in any way, shape, or form good for the process. So if you don't, does anybody else have a concern?
The intention
Yeah.
is to do what you had just pointed out, is
Right.
to basically state that there are different, two groups that are involved in balancing or addressing the budget, each of which have different levers to control the operation of their respective.
I'm going to chime in on what Karen said, and well, it may be true from a legal state standpoint that the restructuring of class sizes is, because that's the only distinction between the two, really. It's reduction in staffing, and the way it's written, it encompasses everything but the lever of restructuring class sizes. And to me, the way it's written as it stands is more community-based problem solving as a whole than it is to separate and highlight kind of the differences, because I I'm not really supportive of the lever of restructuring class sizes. So I think in even considering amending it to include this language, I think, to be fair, we would at least need a majority of us that would want to consider that as one of the possible outcomes of a recommendation. And I personally am not comfortable with that being one of the pieces. Anything in here, I feel, needs to represent the majority of our voices on this committee in terms of the recommendations that we're comfortable with. So since I know I am not comfortable with that as a possible recommendation. So Emma?
I think part of what I'm hearing from Jeff's suggestion there is perhaps an acknowledgement, like, so we use the word reduction in municipal services, and there are potentially levers that are not reductions, but are restructures, right? So if increasing class size is not equivalent to reducing services, in that it is not take away, right? So if it means that, like, we are still able to offer multiple world languages, but those world languages have larger class sizes, that is different than an instance where there's reduced services and there's the reduced access to variety of curriculum or something of that. So I'm not, and I certainly don't want to speak for you, but I'm curious if maybe some of that intent was to highlight the availability that might exist within schools to find sort of restructuring opportunities, rather than just the named reduction in services.
But wouldn't a restructuring of class sizes for more students in a class result in a reduction of teachers that are teaching the, I mean, it's like, it's just saying it.
Not necessarily, because it could also result in not adding additional positions. Right, so it is potentially not one of the things named here.
And I also think it's, it's up to the superintendent has, I wouldn't want to handcuff the superintendent and restrict the options that the superintendent has available to him to deal with the budget constraints that he has to deal with.
How would we be doing
Well,
that?
we can't do, I mean, we aren't, these are just recommendations. So I guess that's where I'm getting at with the report being reflective of what we consider recommendations that should be strongly considered. So, Scott?
Yeah, 2 points. One is that I appreciate the discussion about whether that, about changing class sizes might be appropriate. I don't know that that level of detail needs to be contained in a general document, which is only recommendations, because the superintendent, the school committee, the superintendent will certainly know that that is one of the options. So I don't personally feel the need to call that out. More importantly to me, well, and I'd also say that I think increasing class sizes is a reduction in services from my point of view, but at least for the students. But more important to me is really the point that Karen made, which is we just went through a school strike. We just went through a very divisive period in the city. And to her point about, sort of conversations devolving one side against the other, city against school side, as presently worded, both the city and the school side, or municipal and the school side, are put together in the same bullet point. And my concern is that by separating them out, you lay the groundwork for that kind of push-pull division between, well, you should take it on the city side, not the school side, or vice versa. So that is sort of an overriding concern. But I also, in support of that, would say I don't know that, in a general document of recommendations, we need to get exactly to that level of calling out that one particular different lever that applies here that doesn't apply there.
you have any other thoughts on it? Do we want to call for a vote? We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Okay. All right. So that will remain as is, but we are on page 6. Any other considerations for page 6?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So my suggested language, which I handed out, although I'm going to modify it just slightly, I think could go in one of two places. One would be the top of page 9, but the other would be to add to the bottom of page 6, or, first paragraph of page 7.
Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, can you have a motion, and do you have any extra copies of this?
I handed it out to everyone, except I think I was one short.
Okay.
So maybe
We'll share.
Dr. Silva could share with Karen.
All right, do we have a motion?
So, yeah, so I'll make a motion, then I'll explain it.
All right, and then can we just have a second so we can discuss?
Yep.
That's all.
Yep.
All right,
So I'm going to make a motion to include the following language. It is important to observe that past years' financial forecasts also included projections of deficit, but this deficit forecast is qualitatively different. The arsenal of strategies to close the projected deficit for the first time since 2013 requires raising fees and/or cutting services with unprecedented impact. Awareness of the impact may and should extend past policymakers to the general public as the budget is built. So that is the proposed language. I did some work, the 2013, I was trying to come up with a comparative date. I did a quick search that tells me that while I'm really referring to Mayor Scanlon's days in office, he served through 2013. So I think it's helpful to have a reference date. So that would sort of go in the middle where I had that underlined language, trying to find some reference date. Jerry
do we have
did.
a second? Sorry, I'll second it. I'll just second
Okay,
it.
sorry.
And may I just, so I'm clear on your motion, where are you inserting it? That's all I'm asking.
It would be the fourth full paragraph of other considerations.
The fourth paragraph?
It would be an additional new
Okay.
fourth paragraph.
Wait a minute,
In other
I'm getting
words,
different things here.
The
So
third
we'll go on to
paragraph ends, situation is not unique.
Yep,
It would be the next paragraph.
it would be its own paragraph.
Yes,
Got it. Thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
yeah. So Jerry does talk about this in this paragraph preceding it, talks about, budgetary challenges and so forth, and Jerry does make reference to, on page 8, to certain strategies that no longer exist, all of which I agree with, but I think it does not emphasize to the degree it should the unique nature of what we're facing right now. This is different qualitatively than past forecasts that had projected budget deficits. So that is the reasoning behind the sentence, to really drive home. And I think it came up either with Emma or Paul's comments at last meeting, that it really made sense. I think one of you raised that this is different, this deficit projection. And the general public, if they look back at past financial forecasts, will say, well, what's the big deal? We've always been projecting deficits. This one looks more or less the same. And so to a more lay reader, they wouldn't really appreciate that what we're talking about is particularly unique, say for the last decade or so. So that's the rationale for the language.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments, Counselor. They're thoughtful, and I think they're appropriate. The only part of it, I think, and I know this was a concern because you kind of underlined it, was kind of the time context that we're adding to it.
Yeah.
for the first time since 2013, in my mind, that makes the statement that in
that it happened.
2013 it
That's a
happened.
good point.
And so something that's a little more general might be more appropriate, since we don't know the exact time. I think what you're referring to is the last time we ran out of levers, there were school closures or
Yep.
trash fee implemented, or different fee
Yep.
structures implemented,
Yep.
and things like that. That's been in decades. So if I could make a friendly amendment to that, that maybe we consider for the first time in decades, or something more general
I like
that explains it's been a long time, but it doesn't tie us down to a specific.
I like that, and I would accept that as a friendly amendment, to put, rather than since 2013, say in decades, is that what you,
Yeah, I think that would cover it.
okay. Yeah,
Does anyone else have any thoughts on this one? I think this is also fine by me. This is true. This is all true. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of inserting the amended amendment after the third paragraph in other considerations? All right, motion passes unanimously. I don't know how many of us there are anymore. 9, 8 of us, I think. Okay, all right. On to page 7. Does anyone have any amendments on page 7? This is kind of, there's a lot of facts in here, so I'm hoping you don't have any amendments. 8.
Sorry, I
yep,
missed.
yep.
I actually have a recommendation for page 6,
Okay,
printed,
Yeah.
7 on the PDF. The last paragraph, the sentence that includes the general consensus was that it is highly probable that Beverly would need to increase the tax levy with such an override if policymakers of the city wanted to retain existing services. I don't feel comfortable with the statement that there's a consensus from this committee that we should have an override, and so I think a more general statement saying that, and I'll read it, if city officials are not able to identify and execute reasonable strategies for both raising revenue and reducing costs, it's highly probable that Beverly would need to increase, it's basically the same language at the end.
Okay.
It is highly probable that Beverly would need to increase the tax levy with such an override if policymakers of the city wanted to retain existing services.
So what was the beginning language again? I'm sorry.
The beginning language that's being suggested to be replaced is,
Of where you added it, the first.
I'll just read it again.
Yeah.
If city officials are not able to identify and execute reasonable strategies to both raise revenue and reduce costs, comma, it is highly probable that Beverly would need to increase the tax levy, and then the language is the same.
Right. Do you have so we have a motion, right?
I'll
Do you
second
have
that.
a second? Okay. Any discussion on that?
Jeff, if I could just ask tomorrow morning if you'd just give me that language in an email, I'd
I'll shoot
appreciate
it
it.
tonight.
Tonight's even better.
Tonight, yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought there. The only concern I would have about that amendment is that it's possible, in the scheme of everything that lays before us in terms of decision-making, that policymakers implement decisions that might get us through FY '27, but don't ensure that services can continue to exist without an override, right? They could make decisions that are one-time in nature, that in FY '28, we're right back here and, you know, it could have an impact on services. I'm not saying that's gonna be the case, but I think the way you worded the amendment, it basically says if the policymakers don't make decisions to do these things, then we'd have to do that. Well, they can make decisions to do those things, and we'd have to do that.
Right.
It's not an either or, it could be an and. So just my reaction to that.
Yeah, just a general observation. I had to pick up on this, so I'd like to hear the language again, but I don't think, at least as worded in here, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think there was a general consensus that it was highly probable that Beverly would
Need to
need to have an
consider.
override.
Need to consider. The word considers in there. It is highly probable that Beverly, that should consider an override on proposition.
Okay, but it doesn't say should consider now. That's the, at least not in my version.
No.
It just says, that, as the text verbatim reads in mine, the general consensus was that it's highly probable that Beverly would need to increase the tax levy with such an override.
That's the
There's
sentence
no
before
should,
that.
there's no
Yeah.
qualification to
The
it.
first
Okay.
sentence.
And I don't think we, I don't know, I don't think we agreed,
It is strong language.
or
but-
that there was a general consensus, yeah. Yeah. So, I think we certainly did talk about, Prop 2.5 or not, and I think that was on the table as a possibility, but I don't know that that sentence is in fact
I can
accurate.
see, yeah. Part of it is that we keep dancing around saying it in different ways that, well, if we do those revenue streams, they don't grow. And if we reduce these services, the revenues still don't grow and the expenses will still be more. And I mean, everything kind of still leads back to the tax revenue base is not growing at the same. So I feel like, although it wasn't a general consensus that those are that we're gonna not use the scary word override, there's no other scenarios in which the revenues keep pace with the expenses, no matter, a lot of the things that we've come up with are all short-term solutions. So we don't have to put the general consensus. We can take that out and we can talk about, we can say, it's probable that we'll need to consider this, but the math doesn't add up
Yeah.
one way or another.
If I may, I think that if you kept the first sentence and deleted the second sentence and kept the third sentence, just, it would convey the same basic
go to
idea without getting into
Karen?
the weeds.
I'm gonna go with Karen and then, what?
Well, I was going to say that I think what this document is basically putting on the table for the community is that the residents need to have a robust discussion about their priorities and values. And I don't think that those things happen in a short window of time. I don't think they happen like in budget season necessarily. And I suspect the reality would be that we're going to need to go through a budget process coming up that is going to involve, as Counselor Hausman said, a lot of pain that's going to be distributed across the city. And I don't want people to experience that, but I think that probably they're gonna need to go through that. And that process will then get them to decide what their priorities and values are, and that's when the override conversation would be ripe, I think.
Well, and this, yeah, to that end, the next paragraph in this is kind of suggestions on how to
Right.
form a committee and how to go about these things. So that's kind of where it flow-wise. So, okay, okay, we have a motion and we have a second on an amendment, right?
Yeah, could you
On,
reread?
right, is that, we're back to
Yeah, I
that,
would
right?
just like
We're
to
back
bring-
to,
Yeah, and before we have a vote, I just want to bring up a numbers argument, just to sort of add to this, because I agree 100% that this is not a single-year budget discussion.
right.
This happens over a 3, 4, or 5-year period. And it can't happen within a budget cycle because decisions have to be made where, you know, certain changes need to happen and you may not recognize that revenue that next year, but the following year and after that. So I'm going to bring up another a topic that I brought up before that just as an example, not to say that this is how we try to address it, but I'm going back to this retirement assessment payment where we are putting $14 million into this from now until 2030. We're paying this off 7 years earlier. And if I were to say, how about we take $1.5 million from each of those and pay $1.5 million less? This year I've got $1.5 million. Next year I've got $3 million. That is based on the old number. That gives us a $600,000 deficit. Given the parking and given the trash fees, we can close that $600,000 gap. And we've got an additional $1.5 million for an additional 3 years to close the gap for those remaining years as we're coming up with a solution. I'm not saying that this is what we do. This would require a discussion with the board to reevaluate that payoff structure. But that's $3 million.
Yeah. So you're looking at me, so.
So I'm just sort of, this isn't gonna happen in a, like you said, and I agree, it's not gonna happen in a short period of time. It requires multiple groups get together and address the numbers that are in this table.
I'll just add though, but I do think that it's important for us to put that ball in play though, as
Yes.
Kathleen has said. We don't know, but for all the people sitting at this dais and for many years going back, the prospect of an override has been seemed increasingly more necessary. I don't know whether likely is the answer because that presumes how the community will act. But in my opinion, it does feel like it's necessary.
Yeah, I think it's important that this document reflects what, as an elected official that was elected to represent my constituents' voices and concerns. I have heard a lot of voices express the desire to at least have a choice in this and to at least express their values with a vote on a budget. And I do think the time has come, and I'm not talking about just in this budget. This came up if you look at last year's, financial forecasting report. We talked about it then. That was part of the discussion then, and I was already, looking at this as one of the things that should really be considered. So, I understand that it was not the general consensus. Maybe that was wishful thinking on my part. But I could see amending this by striking part of this and tightening up that paragraph. I would motion to amend to remove the period after Prop 2.5 and strike all of the general consensus, all of that paragraph to the comma. So it would read, the committee had an additional conversation whether the city of Beverly should consider an override of Proposition 2.5 if the policymakers of the city wanted to retain existing services.
Second.
All those in favor of that amendment?
Do we have to vote on?
Well, you're gonna, well, you
I can
Oh, sorry.
withdraw, okay, that's what I'm trying to get, okay,
Okay,
good, okay, that's fine.
withdrawn. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second on my amendment. I will read it one more time. The committee had an additional conversation whether the city of Beverly should consider an override of Proposition 2.5 if the policymakers of the city wanted to retain existing services. All those in favor? All right, motion passes. All right. Page 6. Are we good with 6? Thank you for bringing that up. All right, we're on to page 7. Oh, I think we had nothing on page 7, right? That's what, okay. Page 8.
I would like to make a motion to amend the last bullet under the city closed prior year deficits section to say by reducing certain municipal and school staffing.
Okay. I'd second that motion. All those in favor? I think that keeps it, okay, okay, all those, one more time. All those in favor? Okay. That passes 7 to 4, okay. I'm sorry, did you vote for it? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Any more on page 8? All right. Page 9?
Madam Chair, just as Brian already, we'll be changing these numbers and the percentages. I'll take
Oh,
care of all that.
yep,
It's already,
okay.
we'll definitely take care of that.
All right, anything else on 9 then? And then we're at the spreadsheets, which, please, no on that. We've already done that. So that's gonna stay like that, except for the amendments that we already, okay.
So in order for me to complete what everybody, I only need one thing. Scott, you'll give me something tomorrow morning, and I've got everything else that everybody's asked for.
Okay,
So I'm good.
okay. So, I think that sums up the financial forecasting report. I have a few closing thoughts on this. We had, during this process, and I had promised that we were gonna talk about some of the things that came up as ideas that don't necessarily, they didn't come to fruition as full revenue ideas that would be formalized in a report. But I did really want to applaud the creativity of this committee and the amount of different ideas that people brought up. I'm going to mention a few of them if anyone would like to speak on them themselves. There was one part of the report that I wanted to draw people's attention to that actually I'd like to acknowledge. Counselor Spang is here with us, and she sent me, the town of Dedham actually has a whole project on this, and it's in our report. You all saw it, but for the public's knowledge, they have a whole project, a 3-pronged approach with a website and a committee, deficit reduction committee that is soliciting community input. And I think ideas like that, I'm really hoping that the city of Beverly will take a similar approach in terms of, to the point of the community needs to decide what we're prioritizing and what we're funding. And we need more of that stakeholder input that's not just at the ballot box. And they did a really nice job with their website and their solicitation of the community to, like we've discussed before, this isn't a problem unique to Beverly. This is every town and city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if not the country, is facing these type of challenges. So I'm hoping to see something like that for those watching at home, if you want to check it out. And we also, Jeff brought up that to look into the parking on Lothrop Street. And that's almost like a not Dane Street Beach, that is Dane Street Beach, kind of like the Lynch Park parking lot in terms of tourist revenue capacity, and there's no paid parking there now, and that could you even worked up numbers. If you want to speak more to that, that looked great. I really would like to look into some of these considerations and, also the increase in parking. We have a really low parking rate, and not saying like we just need to raise it across the board, but to look into these items as revenue increases for the city to fill in some of those gaps. And we talk about this every year, and it's really hard to get your arms around because pilots are what they decide they would like to pay us in lieu of taxes. For those following along at home, PILOT stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes for our nonprofits, including, Beverly Hospital, Endicott College, and it is a major impact to not have that tax revenue for some of these large institutions. So I'm going to renew the kind of request to form some type of pilot committee or commission to look into restructuring some of these possible agreements and bringing them more in line with some of the services and budgetary restraints that we're facing, to be contributing partners in the community, which they are. We love having Endicott here. We love having Beverly Hospital here. It's just to look into that. That's another one of those things that needs further exploration to renew those pilot requests. And I'm bringing up just some of these ideas because I know that myself, along with several other counselors, are really happy to work with some of these revenue ideas and bringing them to the table. If you are interested in partnering with any of us or looking into it further, I know that we've already kind of started down the pike a little bit. We're talking about some of those parking revenue streams. So I just wanted to open that up again and and if anyone else wanted to comment on any of those, looking at the future. Yeah, Karen?
It's on. How do you ask Endicott or Beverly Hospital, like, what is the process? Like,
They kind of decide really kind of right. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but it is not required of them by law. So that's part of the equation. So you don't really like necessarily hand them a bill.
right,
Right.
but like, are there ways to?
I would like to look into that. I'm not sure. I'm not 100%
Maybe they're
sure.
watching.
So, yeah.
I know that they have a response. Let me just, they have a response. And the balance between the nonprofit and the tax liability is that they feel that they bring a lot to the community that is not reflected in a tax payment. And so I think that becomes the conundrum, that, that's it. So it's not a one-way conversation. Well, actually, it is more of a one-way conversation, and we're not driving it. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about some of the costs that the city incurs. The fire safety calls to the college, they're extensive. I don't want to single out one institution because, but I think that's the challenge, Karen, is that when you go to one of these organizations and say, we really need some help from you, their response is, we're already helping you in all of these ways, and they'll have a complete response. The larger ones will have a complete rebuttal to the. It's not to say not to do it, but to understand that, I don't think it's a big well that we would.
Right. It's challenging, but it's worth exploring with the committee. Yes, Scott?
Yeah, just really briefly, the tax rate on the commercial and business side is twice the tax rate as the residential side. And one thing we haven't really explored or talked about, but would certainly be a good road to hoe, would be more commercial development and how the city policymakers can, incentivize and maybe look at our zoning and say, what can we do to help make it more likely that we bring in commercial and industrial development into the city beyond what we have now? Because that is twice the punch of residential development. It doesn't rely on something like pilots and so forth. So I'll just leave it at that. But I mean, it may well be that there are zoning changes we could make that would assist the city in that regard.
Or phase 2 to unlock Dunham Ridge, just saying.
100%, yeah, but not only there. Yeah, but
Not only there, but that's one of those things where it comes down to the state economic development, getting on the tip is making that economic case, which is very clear in that area, so.
Yeah.
So those were my final thoughts on that, and I wanted to thank everyone for their work on this committee. And this was a lot more work this year than usual, and everyone really stepped up with a lot of great thoughts and edits, and this really ended up being a document that was a lot more in-depth and thoughtful analysis. It's really hard to write by committee, so I really want you guys to pat yourselves on the back, because this was really, yes, and Jerry, thank you for mending it all together.
And I want to thank the chair for her excellent leadership in chairing this committee through this process.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating and following along at home. For the first time this year, we'll have it on BevCam every year. I liked this, so. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, great work. Go team.
Congratulations.